All right, let's just go over these ingredients. Obviously, you got to have your flour. You're going to have your sugar and your chocolate chips. Obviously, you're going to want your vanilla for flavoring. And we're going to be using some baking soda. Also, we've got some almond milk that's going to go into it, our egg, our butter, and our salt. But the star of our show is actually going to be the gelatin. That is actually what keeps it nice and chewy after the first day. And I'm so excited to share this recipe for you. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to insert the ingredients for you so that you can see them. And I'll also be going over the ingredients as I am mixing this. So let's get making these cookies. All right, so we want 2 cups of this super finely ground almond flour. All right, I'm going to just get this over here out of the way. We are going to put in our baking soda, which is going to be 1/2 of a teaspoon. Put that out of the way. We're going to use 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt. And 1 tablespoon of this gelatin. 1 envelope is actually 1 whole tablespoon. So I'm just going to put the whole envelope in there. All right, and we're going to whisk these dry ingredients up here real quick. Try to break down some of these lumps that might be in there. All right. That's looking pretty good. So I'm going to go and put my dry ingredients over here to the side. And we're going to go ahead and get this egg going. We do have just 1 egg, but this step with the egg is pretty important. We are going to beat it and make it frothy. And basically all that is we're just whisking it really good and putting some air in it and making it real bubbly. All right. So we've got 3 tablespoons of butter here, and I'm going to go ahead and add this. Now it's not going to cream up because I'm very well. It's going to be a little chunky, but that is fine because the way we're doing this recipe. But I'm going to kind of mix it in here and break it up just a little bit. All right, so it's got lumps and bumps in it, but that's okay. Our next step is going to be adding the sugar. So we are just going to be using 1/3 cup of our sugar or sweetener. And the mix that I'm using actually comes from Walmart. And I'm just using a pure, and it's just a stevia blend. So I'm going to add this together here. It's coming together. It's getting really thick now. We're going to go ahead and add our vanilla extract. We'll be using 1 teaspoon of this. If you want a little more vanilla flavor in your cookies, you're more than welcome to use more. This is just what this recipe had called for. All right. So I'm going to stop using the whisk here. And I'm going to go and start using my spatula. I'm going to start adding some of these dry ingredients. And we're going to just start folding it in. Folding it in. And it's actually going to make a really crummy texture. And that's exactly what we want for this step of this. So I'm just going to continue to fold in the dry to our wet. All right. And you can just see that it's, you know, starting to form a nice little dough, still real crummy. So that next step is going to be adding some almond milk. I'm using almond milk, but you can use cashew milk, oat milk, any type of milk that you want. So I'm just going to be using this today. And we are going to be putting in 1/3 cup. All right. And by putting in this milk, it is going to change the texture of our dough here just a little bit. And it's going to be more of a normal cookie dough that we're used to. All right. So we're just going to be mixing this in. Just like folding it in. Okay. So you can see now it's nice and moist, almost like the consistency of what a regular cookie dough would be. And this is going to be our last step, and we're going to go ahead and add our chocolate chips. We're going to be putting in 1 cup. I'm using Lily's today in the semi-sweet. You can get these at Walmart too. Of course, it's only 7 ounces. So, you know, when I put this cup in it, it's almost the whole bag. But now we're going to fold these chocolate chips in. Now, while you are mixing up these ingredients, you're going to want to go ahead and preheat your oven at 350 degrees while you're wanting to mix this up, so that when you get this done, you can go on to your next step. Now, they say to cook it for 15 minutes. And of course, you know, all ovens vary, also depending on what altitude that you're at. So we're going to start out at 15 minutes. We want to get a nice golden crust around this. So I'll show you what I'm going to do next. All right, so the next step is, it actually suggests is that you roll these up in a 1-inch ball in your hands and put them in the pan. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use my cookie scooper here. And you can put this on a pan with parchment paper, or you can use a silicone baking sheet like I am. I'm not exactly sure how many cookies we're going to get out of this. It's different every time that I make it. But what I will do is, for this batch, I will put up the macros that I got. And a serving size is going to be 1 cookie. So sometimes they're 1 carb per cookie. Sometimes they're 2. It just really depends on how many we get out of it. And it just seemed to be just a little bit different each time. All right. In the oven, they will flatten a little bit on their own, but I am going to take a spoon and I'm going to flatten them and try to keep them as uniformly circle as possible. This helps make the cooking more evenly. So, and I don't know, maybe it's my little thing. I just like them to be nice and round and circle. I don't know. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and put them in the oven for 15 minutes. We're going to check on them, see if they're where they need to be, and while we're waiting, I'm going to clean up my mess and we'll be back in 15 minutes. Please bear with me. I somehow lost my audio for these next two clips. Here, I'm just showing you that the cookies only took 15 minutes in the oven to bake, and they got that really nice golden color around it. And they did not come out soft. As you're going to see, one gets flipped upside down, and I flip it back over. But sometimes this recipe, at the 15 minutes, will have that nice color, but they will still be a little bit soft. And if that just happens, you just have to let your baking pan cool down for a few minutes, and then you'll be able to transfer them from the baking sheet to the cooling rack. All right, so as we go into the next clip here, I'm showing that we got 13 from the first batch, and we got 10 cookies from the second batch. So overall, this recipe made 23 cookies. Sometimes it makes 22, sometimes it makes 24. It's a little bit different each time. I already put up the macros for these cookies, which came out to be 1 net carb per cookie. So if you were wanting to have 1, 2, or 3 cookies, it would be very easy to put into your macros for the day. The next part I'm going to go into here is going to be talking about the difference between almond flours. This batch I used Bob's Red Mill Superfine Almond Flour, and it really made a huge difference in the cookies. I'm actually reaching into, I will be here in a second, reaching into my owl that I have my cookies that I made previously from a different flour. I had actually used the Walmart brand almond flour. And when I pull out this cookie, you are going to see a huge difference between the textures of the two cookies. You can see that the smaller cookie that I had baked previously is pretty grainy, and the cookies that I just baked is more like a normal cookie. When you do make these cookies, if you don't mind the grainy texture of almond flour, it won't really matter what kind of flour you use. But if you kind of have an aversion to the graininess and you're like, oh, another almond product, I'm just showing that maybe using a different type of almond flour will be really beneficial for you, because there is a huge difference, and when you bite into them, you can taste the difference. They're both chewy and smooth and soft. So that's not the problem, but you may want to consider that when baking. All right, so we are back to the most important part, and that is, how do they taste? Because if you're going to do a recipe and it doesn't taste good, then you just wasted your time. But I'm going to tell you, you're not going to waste your time with these cookies. They are so soft, and they bake up relatively close to what a regular cookie with regular flour instead of almond flour. They're really good, and as you can see, they're just full of chocolate chips. Every time I make them, they turn out really good. So it's a true and tried recipe, and I think you should make them too. I think you'll be really, really impressed with the consistency, and that you can actually make a product with almond flour that isn't so crumbly and so bland, and that the texture is just so drastically different that you're just like, yeah, it's almond flour. I think you'll really like this. So stay tuned. I'm going to be working on some Thanksgiving holiday recipes, and we're going to have some fun with this. Remember, your journey starts with you. You got to start with that first step.